Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. As ever, it's the humblest of all your servants, Limes, welcoming you to Ice Creams. This weekend, I was fortunate enough to catch up with director, writer, and actor Emma Dirk. Before we get to the interview, let's take a look at the trailer to Emma's latest award-winning film. It's a sci-fi horror hybrid, Salient Minus 10. Emma, it's so good to finally kind of, I mean, we've talked for a while now, but it's nice to sort
Yeah,
of meet you face to face. And
exactly.
yeah, and so happy that you've joined us on this Sunday after. I got to tell you, because it's 1 o'clock for me. I mean, I know it's 6 o'clock for you there, but
Yeah,
I'm kind of in a British frame of mind now, and I'm
yeah,
thinking 1 o'clock on a Sunday. Man, when I was a kid, I'd be getting ready to watch Thunderbirds and have my mum's Sunday roast now.
yeah.
But anyway, who cares about me and Thunderbirds? What we care about is Women in Horror Month. And thank you for bringing that to my attention. You are going to be the first in a series of interviews. You are one of the most iconic women in horror in my life. I can tell you that right now.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
you've done so much fantastic. You've done directing, writing, producing, acting. Like, it's just, my goodness. I guess the first question I kind of want to ask you is, what was your entry point into the genre from
Mhm.
a childhood perspective? What kind of got you first going into horror?
Well, I've always loved horror, ever since I can remember. But I think there are two things. So, first of all, my dad was a butcher and was for quite a large chunk of his life, his career. So, as a child, like sort of, I don't know, 3 year old or something like that, I used to walk through the walk-in freezer, which it's an adult walk-in freezer in a butcher shop. So to a child, this is huge.
Mm.
Um, it's sort of sounding like something from Saw now, isn't it? But but yeah, I used to see like all the animals and things in there. So um, yeah, I suppose that's quite horrifying, isn't it? Really. So
Oh,
maybe
big
that
time.
sort of given me a strange path into horror. And then the other thing, I saw Albert Pune's Sword and the Sorcerer, which is a brilliant film. It's more of a
Amazing.
dark fantasy,
Mhm.
um, but I don't know if you remember the opening scene, but it's pretty intense horror,
Yes, big
especially
time.
for a young child.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think those are my first kind of avenues in. Um, but yeah, I mean, I've always loved horror and kind of like creepy monsters and things like that. So
It actually, I got to pick up on that because I love Sword and the Sorcerer. I think it was fantastic.
mm,
And that was a big one for me back in the 80s. But I don't know what it's like in the UK, but it's almost a
mm,
forgotten film, it feels like to me. Because like I talk about it out here, nobody is like, what are you talking about? Because Sword and the Sorcerer, just to get this clear, that was the one with the sword where it fired the middle blade out, right?
yeah,
Because there was another kind of cheesier version, like the Hawk the Slayer or whatever it was with the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. But yeah, you're right. The sorcerer himself was like, oh my god, he was really freaky looking.
Yeah.
And what about, so obviously generally people that really love horror, they seem to come in from either the universal horror perspective or the
Mm.
Hammer perspective. If you were going to pick one or the other, which one kind of angle did you come in?
Neither, to be honest.
Really?
I mean, I grew up watching, stuff from both of those studios,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think I would really say I'm aligned to either one of them,
Okay.
to be honest. Yeah, I think the kind of horror I like is slightly different. I know lots of people do love the Universal monsters and they do love all the classic Hammer films.
Mm-hmm.
And I do like some of those things, but I'm not like a mad fan for them. I think there are other other films that I've kind of have built my path, if you like.
Give me some of those.
Well, I grew up in the 80s, so okay, like I said, these things were on TV.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, The Sword and the Sorcerer was the first kind of thing that I watched in the 80s. But it was more kind of like darker fantasy and stuff like that. And as I got into the 90s, watching things like Hellraiser and Alien and stuff like that. So those are more kind of the films that have influenced my love of horror, I would say, more so than the classics.
Okay. So you've gone through that, you're watching these films, you're seeing all these things. Where do you start making the connect where you're like, you know what, I want to jump from being the person that's watching this to the person that's creating it, acting in it, writing it? Where does that come into the picture?
Well, that kind of came into the picture much later on. So I've always been creative. I used to do fine art, I used to do photography, and then I think it was in 2007, 2008, I joined a photography meetup group. But when I joined, they assumed I was joining as a model, which was very flattering of them. And then I actually ended up doing some modeling. And I ended up doing that for a number of years, and modeling for like boutique brands and stuff like that, the catalogs. And then from that, I got offered some acting roles. So, I mean, the modeling and stuff is great. You get great images of yourself and things, but it's quite boring. You just stood around all day. I mean, people say you do that in acting, but it's a little bit kind of more involved. And yeah, just when I kind of got onto Kim Wilde and BF's Every Time I See You, I Go Wild, that was kind of a turning point for me. So I was involved in that music video, front of camera as an actor, a couple of other small ones for a band called Exkin, who I also did a little bit of vocal work for. And then from that point, I ended up doing a couple of like interviews at Fright Fest one year.
Right.
I think it was in 2013. I should know, my bio should know really, but I think I think that was in 2013. And that was for a couple of different like news sites. So one of them was the Spooky Isles, and one of them was Richard Gladman, who unfortunately passed away 5 years ago. I think yesterday to the day, actually, from the time we're recording this. And yeah, so I did these things for these different outlets, and I was interviewing these filmmakers, and they'd kind of not done things before, and they delivered some absolutely fantastic work. Because for part of the interviews, I got to watch their films on screeners and stuff like that. And I just thought, why aren't I doing this? Why am I doing all the front of camera stuff when I come from a background as a creator? So I just decided to make my first film, Seize the Night, and it all kind of went from there. And I just went in the deep end.
So let's talk about Seize the Night for a second. Wonderful. First of all, I love that one. Where was walk me through the jumping off for that? Because obviously it's pretty kind of high octane vampire. And just so you know, I gave the viewers a little bit of a taste at the beginning of this of Seize the Night, so they to kind of give them a little bit of intro to it. But yeah, let's talk about how that got started and where that kind of jumped on. Yeah,
so that started in 2014, and like I said, I just decided I wanted to make something. And I do like those kind of action films, with the horror element and stuff like that. I didn't appreciate how much work it would be to try and recreate something like that on a budget of £5,000. Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was actually about £5,500 all in. And I just thought, okay, this is what I want to do. I'm going to do this. I just got people on board. People were keen to come on board the project. Ended up shooting this in the middle of winter. It was so cold. It's absolutely freezing cold. I mean, you can see the outfit I have on. It's not particularly warm. It's just all this, the leather jacket and everything like that, and a really thin outfit underneath. Big mistake, because I ended up having like colds and stuff for like almost a year afterwards. It was terrible. Oh. So I can really appreciate when they say people have long COVID and stuff now, because sometimes if you get one of these colds and you really run down from all the shooting hours and editing and stuff like that, it really,
you can't kick it.
Yeah, you can't kick it. And just like, it was so cold. There's one scene where my character meets Paul Ewan's character, who's an arms dealer, and there's like a billow of smoke that comes out of his mouth, and people said, was he smoking in that scene, because they didn't see the cigarette? Well, it wasn't smoke, that was his breath. It was that cold. So Yeah, so mistakes like that, filming something like that in the absolute freezing cold. Some of the scenes we ended up, they were quite complex and stuff, and we ran out of shoot time, or something happened technically and I couldn't get the location again.
Mhm.
There was actually one of the end scenes where I speak to where my character speaks to Tobias, Carey Thring's character.
Mhm.
Um, so we actually shot that first in a completely different location, Bunker 51 in London, which is a fantastic kind of paintball venue, but it's really done up well, so you can use it like a film set. It looks amazing, but because we shot it with a different camera and it didn't quite pick up light in the same way, it was too grainy to use compared with everything else, at least to my really kind of pernickety standards about how I want everything to be. So we ended up reshooting that at a factory somewhere
Mhm.
else. So there were a few different reshoots, which obviously increases the costs, which is why the budget then goes up and stuff. Yeah, but you learn from your mistakes. So I think the end result's pretty good for what it is in a first film, really.
It's wonderfully, it's wonderful. It's wonderfully slick to look at, and it actually takes me to something that you're saying when you said, oh, we did this on £5,500.
Mm,
I don't know. I generally find that the less money that goes into the film,
mm,
when you look at some of the greats, the better the end product. I'll
mm,
take Terminator 1 over Terminator 2 any day of the week, because it's like, yeah, they had $50 gazillion, 50, bazillion to make Terminator 2. But you look at Terminator 1 and look at what they achieved with like 50 pound, and kind of a pound of grapes to make
mm.
the film, because the imagination kicks in there. And it's like, okay, we can't do this, this, and this. How do we do it from a story perspective? And I think you may agree with me as a fellow UK citizen. Blake Seven was a show that really, you watch the sets wobble and everything and that, but the thought and that went into the stories, it's untouchable. So I like that you guys had that little bit of less money there. I think it maybe improved it. I don't know.
Maybe, maybe not. I mean, certainly would have made it easier if I'd had more money, and
Yeah.
certainly would have saved some of my own money, because only about 1,300 of that approximately was from funding.
Mhm.
The rest was from my pocket. So this is also something I have to be a little bit more careful of for future films, because a short film, you can't sell it. I don't make any profit out of it. I make the DVDs and stuff like that, but it just about covers the cost of the DVDs. So this is something I need to just be a little bit more aware of going forwards, managing budget, or securing external budget if I want to make something a bit more fancy.
Gotcha. Okay. And obviously you did Salient -10.
Yes.
Am I pronouncing that correct?
Yes.
Okay, good, right? So you did that one, which again, beautiful, slick, but more sci-fi trappings
Hmm.
there. Do you see yourself going back into horror again, or do you prefer like kind of branching off into sci-fi, or do you want to kind of hybrid the two maybe?
Mm. Well, to me, both of those films are a hybrid of both. I think if you look at Season Night, there is a sci-fi angle. So you've got the whole virus thing, which, strangely enough, is quite similar to the whole COVID-19 thing right now. So you've
Mm.
got this virus that's been manufactured to kill monsters, so like werewolves and vampires and stuff like that, to eradicate them. You've got the horror element in the fact that they are just werewolves and vampires. There's nothing particularly nasty in it. In Salient -10, obviously there's a more of an overbearing sci-fi angle, but
Mm.
I've got a stronger horror element in that with the corpse than I ever had with Season Night. So really for me, it's kind of a blend of both things. So I would say horror overall. And the next one I want to make will be more kind of geared towards, I would say, not classic horror, but let's say vintage horror.
Mm-hmm.
It may have a sci-fi angle, but it's going to be mainly geared more towards the horror aspect. But in everything I do, I'd say it just has to be dark. It's kind of like a dark fantasy, whether that's horror or sci-fi.
Okay. Kate, coming back again to the kind of the Women in Horror Month,
Mm.
I want to ask you kind of a little bit of a more personal question, and that
Mhm.
is that what would you find in, obviously, we talk about, equality has been a big sort of, the male domination in the industry and such. Are there any sort of specific challenges that you came across that, because there's a lot of women that listen to these podcasts, that you would like to elaborate on?
Well, I think a lot of women, having spoken to them, have had worse times than me in terms of more heinous things. But definitely in terms of like more general things, people will assume you're an actor more than a director. It doesn't help that I actually do act as well, though. But if I turn up to a festival and I'm the director and it's my film, people do often assume that I'm the actor. They're representing the film. I think also in terms of opportunities. So I've seen my peers who are male offered opportunities, but I haven't been offered those opportunities, even though we might have had the same kind of exposure, feedback on our films, that kind of thing. So I think it's kind of not necessarily what people are saying to you, but what they're not saying to you a lot of the time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make all the sense in the world, because it's almost like, I mean, we're going through kind of the Me Too age now, and there's a part of me that thinks, okay, great, we're talking about it, but also some of the people, like obviously, we know certain big names that just went to jail and such. Are they going to now go and try and make sure, okay, I'm going to act a lot more smarter and under the radar? And is it, you know what I mean? Is it kind of pushing it more into the shadows? That's the question, I guess.
I think it could be. I mean, like I said, I know people that have had far more heinous things happen to them, and they are sort of more along the Me Too kind of stories. And I'm not going to talk about those, but Absolutely. Some of the ladies I've spoken to have had quite horrible things happen to them in situations that they shouldn't have been in. And I've not had that. Probably the most weird thing that I had was a chap contact me saying he wanted to make a film. I turned up to meet him. I actually brought a male chaperone friend along with me, because I just thought it just seemed a little bit odd. Sure. And he wanted me to, this is quite bizarre, play a part where a clown was grinding me. So I just thought, okay, this is a bit odd. I haven't seen the full script. This might just be out of context and stuff like that. But it just seemed really weird, and it ended up in a strip club. So I thought, that's not the kind of film that's for me, really. I don't know whether it even got made. But there have been a few things like that. But it's actually more, in terms of that kind of thing, I have just some strange messages. I have strange messages quite a lot. Not from necessarily people in the industry. It is often quite a lot to do with vampire stuff. So obviously I've done a vampire film, and I've been in another couple of vampire films, and I get some strange messages off the back of that.
Oh, goodness.
Which is why I've turned off most of my messaging, to be honest.
Well, and do you want to know something? I got to tell you, that's actually, I'm going to give you kind of a male perspective for a second. That's actually created a difficulty for me, because and I'm sure people like me that are doing this because we've actually got something we want to say, and we love the genre. But whenever I approach, thank you for all the assistance you've given. And I managed to get Dee Wallace now is going to come on the show and such. But there's always that, whenever I'm approaching sort of a female artist, it's like, oh my God, I know she probably gets 60,000 gazillion stupid messages a day into her inbox. How do I get her to read this quickly and make sure that she understands this is not weirdo number 7 or 20 or right? You know, it's I don't know. It's just, I guess it's just the times we live in, right? It's weird. But coming back to kind of a more positive angle, and that is, what were who were your biggest sort of female influences in the genre as you were kind of, getting ramped up into horror there?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's people like Sigourney Weaver and Alien. So I know like practically everybody says this, but I mean, it is true, isn't it? She is amazing. And although she is like a final girl and everything like that, she's just such a strong person. And that's what she is. She can just be described as a person. She's not there to be, a femme fatale or like super glamorous or anything like that. She is just an everyday person. Women can relate to her. Men can relate to her, and she basically, shows strength at the end, and she is like a strong woman. And obviously when we get into Aliens, it's a bit more like your Terminator 2 kind of thing. She goes a bit more full on, but
But you can't beat that. But then again, I guess we're not going to turn down that the iconic image of the battle between her and the Queen in the loader thing. So I think we'll let him have that. We'll let him pass on that. But she's oh man, she's amazing. Alien is such an iconic film. What about the kind of the more sort of grounded female heroines like the Laurie Strodes and the Sydney Prescotts and Nancy from Nightmare on Elm Street? Where do you sit on those kind of characters?
Yeah, I mean, again, Laurie Strode, I think she is relatable as a person. So again, she's not like super, okay, I don't want to say feminine, but do you know what I mean? She's not like super girly, like, you know, and the whole concept of a final girl was you're supposed to have quite a sweet, innocent, sort of, you know, young woman who's sort of virginal and stuff like that, wouldn't say boo to a goose, and then things happen and they're like a super strong person. But again, I kind of feel that, you know, she was quite a strong person from the start for me.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And I actually did a post a while ago on one of the pages. I found that something I never thought of before, which I'm actually starting to think more about my own sort of trajectories and things. That was literally the first time in horror that I ever saw a woman go up against this sort of indestructible creature. It was always Van Helsing or Christopher Lee's character from The Devil Rides Out. It was always a scientist, a professor, an occult, you know. And then when Laurie came along, and it's like, okay, it's a babysitter, it's the girl next door, and bam, she's resourceful. She cares about the kids. She's getting like, wow, that was to me, that movie needs to get more recognition on just that angle alone than obviously Michael Myers, right? But were you an Elm Street fan?
Yes and no. I mean, a lot of the Elm Street stuff I watched was the later stuff rather than the first film. Don't ask me how that happens, but quite often I end up watching the later films in a series and then go back to the original one. So, I mean, I was a little bit too young to watch Nightmare on Elm Street when it came out.
So what was because obviously I'm coming at this from someone that turns 50 this year, Gramps. What was your sort of, did you enter the genre, you said sort of at the late 80s, the mid to late 80s was when you went in? Because I'm obviously thinking, for me it was Dracula and the Mummy and all this stuff and everything and that. But I guess you were kind of already coming in when things were sort of exploding in that new sort of 80s, Clive Barker, Lovecraftian kind of way. What were you reading?
Oh, okay. So as a teenager, I read loads of horror books. I read about 10 books a month, sort of novellas. There was a thing called Point Horror. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
I do know Point Horror.
Yeah. Point Horror and Point SciFi. I mean, obviously I wouldn't read them that I was an adult, right? But yeah, I started with all of those, and then started picking up other horror books, and even things like Satan's Harvest, which is by Ed and Lorraine Warren, I believe, which is a paranormal book about a chap that got possessed and the exorcism and stuff like that, which is of course all coming out now in the Conjuring films and everything. And then I just moved on to all kinds of other horror. So probably in more recent years, I say more recent, in the last 15 years, I've read a lot of Sean Hudson. He's my favorite author. He's absolutely amazing. Graham Masterson as well. He's fantastic. I read a lot of his work. So, did
you read any James Herbert? Yeah, there you go.
You just say at the same time.
Gotcha. Oh man, that was. Did you? Oh, I gotta ask you. Did you ever read because we're talking about James Herbert there for a second? Did you ever read The Dark by James Herbert?
No, I don't think I have.
Read it. It's really, honestly, I gotta tell you, that is one of the scariest books I've ever read in my life. And it's scary because the way James, I mean, was such a good storyteller, but it's one of those things where, and I think we will probably both agree on this, it's more frightening when the characters are doing the right things and shit still keeps going from bad to worse. And that's the thing with this. It's like literally this character, the protagonist in this story, it literally all starts like kind of a Warrenish kind of a house that seems to be possessed, and the guy comes investigating, and then it starts like there's something darker going on that because it's James Herbert, it starts to become apocalyptic as the book goes on. But literally as this character is going through things and trying to save the people they love, and it, like they're doing all the right things at the right times, and it just keeps ramping up the tension. I'm surprised actually no one's ever tried to film it, to be honest with you.
Well, I'm surprised. Yeah, I mean, there are so many great books by great horror authors that haven't had screenplays written from them, so I don't know why. I mean, Stephen King, obviously we've had lots from him, and although I love the films based on Stephen King novels, I really don't like the way he writes. So no offense to Stephen King, I think he's a fantastic author, but I just don't quite get into his books as much as other authors, so which is a shame.
Yeah, and that's fair enough, because I mean, like you just said yourself, no offense, it's just that we've all got different, and I mean, fear, like comedy, it's such a subjective thing that something that might frighten the hell out of me, you kind of would be like, yeah, all right, yeah, that was scary. But you know, the same as what makes people laugh, right? Although with that said, I gotta tell you, I love Salem's Lot by Stephen King. I think that's a fantastic book. I really do. And the mini series with David Soul, that was amazing. I'm going to ask you something, because I've been gone for 25 years. I heard they did an adaptation of James Herbert's Creed with Lenny Henry in. Did you see that? Yeah.
No, the last adaptation that I thought they did was The Secret of Crickley Hall.
That may be.
And I've seen that as well. Just read the book.
This is going back a way. I think this is actually like the late 90s, early 2000s. Like I said, I've been gone 25 years, right? Yeah. But so what was the Legend of Crickley Hall then?
But if I can kind of remember, it's a ghost story to do with the wartime and a horrible teacher and a sort of orphanage thing.
Really, eh?
Yeah. I mean,
was this a BBC?
Yeah, I think it was BBC adaptation. I can't be 100% sure. I don't have it on DVD. I only watched it once on TV. But yeah, the book was great, and it had a lot of kind of child paedophilia and stuff like that in, which like understandably out of the TV series. But yeah, I think it was a great book. I can't remember what the last James Herbert book I read was. It was again, there were quite a few Nazi ones that he did, and it was like a Nazi one with Hitler's great grandchild or something like that. Sort of occultist kind of book. I can't remember what it's called. I've got it in the cabinet behind this screen.
Wasn't the Spear?
I can't open it because I've got a screen in front of it.
Was it the Spear? Was it?
No.
Because that was another Nazi themed one that he did there.
Yeah, well, I read like a whole bunch of his at one point, like a few years ago, and it kept to me, oh, there's another Nazi one, and another Nazi one, you know. So I don't know, I've obviously just picked up a string of these ones, but yeah, no, I can't remember what it's called. I've got it in hardback, and it's got a really nice cover.
Beauty.
I can't remember what it's called. Sorry.
And you say no, it's okay, no worries about it. And you say you're a big collector. Now you said about what's behind the screen. I'm like, yeah, okay. I want to kind of peel that back and sort of take a peek behind there. Yeah, I know you've got wonderful, like you collect, like I collect action figures and God knows what, posters and stuff. You collect, I've seen you collect dolls and action figures and things. Have you got anything with you there that we can see?
Well, only one that I can reach to in here. So
go for it.
I moved my like office space into a different room, and this was previously my studio. So I had like a whole bunch of room, but now because I've got all the stuff in here, like I'm basically crushed against the wall here with this little background behind me on like a little miniature stool. So just to spoil the glamorous illusion there, so I can't like reach to too much. I've just got the things around me, but yeah, I'll show you Otis. So. He's obviously he's not from a film yet, so he's going to be in my next film. I can't tell you what he's going to be doing or too much about that right now because I don't want to give anything away. And to be honest, it's going to be one of these things where I know what I want to make, but it's going to need budget. So yeah, we'll have to see, because obviously the economy is quite bad at the minute. And
Yeah, right,
the pandemic, but I am writing it.
I can tell you right now, it's going to freak me out, because that doll, there used to be one of those in the co-op down the street to me in Collio Row when I was a kid, and it used to, like, honestly, I'd make nightmares about the damn thing. Like, really, it's freaky.
Wow. Okay, I want to visit that co-op now.
It's I think it's a 7. I think it's a 7-Eleven now. I don't think it's a co-op anymore. But yeah, but what, you know what? Why do you think dolls are so inherently frightening, like, to so many people, and to me included?
Yeah.
Give me your perspective on that.
Okay. Do you know what I think it is, right? I mean, I think it's particularly like sort of human looking dolls, right? So his eyes, if you look at these, they're pretty piercing. And I think that's the problem people have with dolls, because they have like the human eyes, and I think they just get a bit scared by them. Is that making sense? I'm trying to repeat an article I read like maybe 2 years ago in about in about 20th of the words, and probably not making sense. But
no, it does make sense.
Just that they do look human, don't they? And people say, "Oh, the eyes follow you around the room and things." I mean, I don't find them scary, but if you stare at them for too long, it's a bit weird.
Well, it's funny, because you think here's something else, right? Look at Doctor Who. It was gone for so many years, and then it finally came back in 2005 or whatever. Yeah. All those classic villains. What was the first villain that they brought back? It was the Autons, those dummy things.
Okay.
Right in the very first episode, and like, to me, it's like, why would you pick that out of, because there's just something about, like, mannequins freaked me out as a kid as well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh Jesus. Yeah, that's good. No, I want to see that. That's gonna be awesome.
Yeah. So he's from like a creator in America called Twisted Tug Studio. So he does some really good stuff if anyone wants to check him out.
Amazing. I'll drop the link in on the interview. Where do you sorry, I don't mean to cut you off there. Sorry. Where do you see the trends kind of going now? Because with all these different things, I mean, you said about that, I picked up on that you said that BBC drama was dealing with pedophilia and such. And obviously, unfortunately, we're seeing so much of that now, which is god awful. Where do you see these kind of Me Too, the pedophilia, America on the verge of civil war? Where do you see these kind of topics tying into the horror trend now?
I'm not sure. I've been asked that before, and I don't really know how to fit in, to be honest. Yeah, that's the best answer I can give you with that. I mean, something like the whole Harvey Weinstein thing and the Me Too, I could see that fitting into more of like a thriller type situation. I recently watched the Marla Hanson story, which was about a real woman. She was an actress, and this guy, her landlord, became obsessed with her. And this is like completely kind of Me Too thing. He wouldn't leave her alone. He completely stalked her, and she rejected him. And then basically he got some thugs to cut up her face to destroy her looks. Except she is an exceptionally beautiful woman, you know, even with the scars and everything like that. But it did unfortunately halt her modelling career. You know, and that was made into like a TVM thriller, which is really good. I found it really interesting. But I can see like the Harvey Weinstein thing, sort of like him ruining women's like careers and sort of, you know, blackmailing them and things like that. I could see that fitting into a thriller quite easily. I don't know about horror.
Pardon me, sorry?
I'm not sure about how it could fit into a horror.
As a horror, yeah. I mean, I guess we're just living through, it just feels like our lives are a daily horror these days. Like, I agree. I almost wonder if we're going to see, and again, this is speculation, and I'd be interested to hear what you think about this, but I almost wonder if we're going to see a backswing of the pendulum toward more classic stuff, because people just want escapism from that. I mean, you turn on we just went through 4 years of absolute fucking nightmare on a daily basis when we put on social media every day, and, you know, and we both know who I'm talking about, but don't worry about it. But yeah, so I almost wonder if people want just an absolute escape and want to go back to the classics and such. But then again, they don't seem to always work. I mean, look at what they did with Did you watch Tom Cruise's Mummy film? What did you think of that?
No, do you know what? I haven't watched it. Just because it had such bad reviews. And usually, okay, I don't really pay attention to bad reviews, to be honest. There's plenty of things I've watched where they've got like a 3 on IMDb or something, and I thought that they were great. But just looking at it, it just didn't fit in with my idea of what The Mummy would be.
Yeah.
And I thought if it's something that ever comes like on Netflix, I'll watch it. But I haven't watched it yet. So
The Invisible Man was really good, and that
was really good.
Now that let's talk about that, because that really ties into, that was very topical with the stalker boyfriend being the invisible creature. Give me your thoughts on that film.
So that film, I think primarily it's like a domestic abuse film. And the whole kind of it's got like a sci-fi and a horror angle, obviously, like without giving away spoilers. I mean, we've seen it, we know what the sci-fi angle is, but it's kind of like wrapping a domestic abuse story into that kind of aspect, I think. And I think it was great. But, you know, some people have really slated it for that. And I can understand the original Invisible Man. It's nothing like this, you know. But I think the story was great and really powerful. And I think it really worked.
And you know what? I disagree with people that say that it wasn't like, because when you go, and you know what? I actually just watched the original Invisible Man with my 5-year-old wanted to watch it. And he loved it. He said, Dad, that's so, like, to watch him so engrossed in a 1930s film was great. But I don't think that there's a big difference. I see a real pathway, because he was a nutcase that got worse and worse with the, like, he went with the invisibility. And to me, that was just another present day way of showing, well, how would it drive someone crazy these days? The first thing the guy's thinking of is the girl he lost, and he couldn't, like, no, I don't see a difference at all, really. I just think it's just moving with the times. But then again, like, how do you kind of do, I guess in that respect, to do like a present day, like say Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and take like an alcoholism, I mean, because really it's still a story of addiction, right?
Yeah.
But would you like to tackle one of those classic subjects? Is that something you'd like to have a crack at?
No, not specifically. No. I kind of want to more go down the horror. Okay, this is hard to explain without actually giving away plot lines. So I have to be quite careful there.
For sure.
There are some traditional aspects, I say, that I want to go down that don't really have this in. But I do certainly see what you're saying in terms of like addictions and stuff like that. And actually, I've been watching the Twilight Zone original series, like the whole 5 seasons. I've just finished season 1. And there's an episode, I can't remember the name of that episode, so if any fans are watching of the Twilight Zone, have to forgive me for that, because I know most people remember episode names and stuff. But there's one where there's a chap, he goes to what do you call it, a gambling house, which I've forgotten the name, in Las Vegas, basically. And he's completely anti-gambling, and his wife just, let's just, have a bit of fun, it's just fun, we've won some money, let's just go and, spend it playing around and stuff. And he's so against it, but then as soon as he starts gambling, he becomes completely addicted. And I thought that was a really good portrayal of addiction. And actually, I think the Twilight Zone was well ahead of its time. There are so many different themes going through it, which I think are really relevant today. So I would definitely recommend that people watch that if they haven't already. Pick up a box set. Agreed.
And I almost think, to me, I think it's kind of a little bit why, like, don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking Black Mirror, but I had so many people come up to me and say, oh, you got to watch Black Mirror, it's so good, it's this, it's that. And to me, I'm just like, I grew up with Rod Serling and the Twilight Zone. There's like, it's okay, I'm not saying that they're bad stories, but this to me was done at a time when, in the 60s, when look at Star Trek, for example. Who would have thought in the 1960s a show with in the height of the Cold War, a Russian, a Japanese guy, an alien, a woman, all working together for the peace of mankind. They snuck so much with the Twilight Zone and Star Trek past TV censors, by wrapping it up in those trappings. That I agree with you. The kids now, you want to talk to me about Black Mirror, you go back and watch the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, I agree. It is quite a similar series. I mean, obviously the Black Mirror stuff focuses a lot on technology, and
Yeah.
sort of near future sci-fi. But yeah, I think some of the moral messages that it includes are quite similar.
I did like Black Mirror though. I haven't watched them all, but I did see the one with Hallie Atwell and is it Dominic Gleeson where he's she lost her husband in a car crash and she gets paid to have him brought back as an android. Did you see that one?
I can't remember that one.
Check it out because that I think that one would be right up your alley. And I'm specifically not going to say any more because I want you to watch it.
Yeah.
To ask you a traditional question, because I've got to ask you this. What is the movie that frightened the living daylights out of you at any point in your life? Like, what's the movie that scared you the most?
Okay, it doesn't now because I recently rewatched it. But The Exorcist, the first time I watched that, okay, I don't agree with pirates, but someone lent me a pirate version of The Exorcist when I was about 15, I think. And yeah, I mean, it was on VHS and everything like that. So it was all a bit like, degraded and everything, which made it obviously even more realistic. And that was terrifying. I slept with a crucifix under my pillow. No joke.
God. Yeah, no.
Just to be sure, just in case something happened.
It's terrifying, and it's a great film just on its own rights, just on its own merits. Like it's powerful. But to speak to something you said there, because I know you said I don't agree with pirates. I know exactly what you're talking about because it was different. People don't realize how censored the UK was back then. We couldn't see The Exorcist any other way than a pirate because it got swept off the shelves. We couldn't see Chainsaw Massacre any other way than a pirate because we weren't allowed to. So to me, I'm kind of like that's a different kettle of fish because like you should have been like allowed to watch that film by legal means. You know why were all these things banned, right? So but yeah, the Exorcist. Did you find The Omen frightening? I ask you that because you mentioned The Exorcist.
Sorry, which film?
The Omen, the original.
Yes, The Omen. Yeah. Not as frightening as The Exorcist, to be honest. But I think The Omen is a very, very well put together film. I really like it.
Do you think these movies are so frightening because regardless of where we sit on our spiritual beliefs, there are certain things that we learn from a very young age that become ingrained, and that fear of sort of the devil and
yeah, I agree. I mean, being brought up in the UK, I was brought up in school where they had assemblies, like religious assemblies and things like that, even though I wouldn't particularly class myself as religious, and not all the students certainly were Christian that were there. But I think that is that kind of thing about people talking about the devil and something, or like the devil's going to come and get you if you're bad, that kind of thing. And yeah, so I think, I mean, like I said, I'm not religious, but I do love what I would call religious horror films, which people might say, oh, what's that? But then when you think about The Exorcist is a religious horror film. The Omen is a religious horror film. There's so many things like that, dealing with demons and the devil and stuff like that basically are religious horror films. Yeah,
and I think it's okay because I get into this argument a lot more than I probably should. So I'm going to be very careful. I'm going to tread carefully here, but I honestly believe that religion and spiritual belief are two completely different things. If there really is an entity, a force, whatever, and that's what makes these films frightening, because I do believe there's a force of good, I do believe there's a force of evil. I just am not bold enough to try and personify them. But I don't think I need to be in a certain building or talk to a certain person to talk to that thing. So I think that where we all sit different on different religious things, we've all got a spirituality that the Exorcist plays to that, and the Omen plays to that, and so. But I guess we're kind of slowly moving toward time now. So there's something I do really want to ask you, because again, it's women in horror. There's a lot of girls out there that were the same age, that are now the same age I was then, and the same age you was then when you were taking your first steps into the genre. What would your advice be to a girl that's listening to this now that maybe wants to take that steps from viewer to creator?
I think basically try and learn as much as you can. Don't let anyone stop you or persuade you otherwise. Especially, you know, some people can be a bit odd about horror. They think, I mean, I love the Saw films, but everyone quite often thinks horror is about torture porn and lots of blood and guts and things like that. It doesn't have to be at all. It can be completely different and very subtle. So I would say, yeah, don't worry too much about what other people think. It's what you think. And make sure you learn how to make things. Try making things by yourself first until you've kind of got a bit more, you know, training behind you, and you can, you know, kind of what your vision is and stuff like that. So, for example, if somebody takes their mobile phone, I mean, most young people have mobile phones these days. You can write a short story, something you can film by yourself, edit by yourself, you know, maybe have one other actor in, or even like Gloria. I mean, I had to film that of myself. It's not easy, but you can do it. So I would say build things up like that, build up a portfolio, and then go from there. I mean, obviously the other option is, if you can, go to college and go to university, go to film school. If you can do that, great. Because if you can get a degree in film, the advantage is that you can then hopefully walk out into a TV production company and get a job there and work your way up. Whereas often if you don't have that, you can't do that. And you've got to go down a different route. But whichever route you go down, just make sure that you do, you know, just pursue what you want to do and spend your time learning things and building things up slowly and gradually.
And look at different angles. You're writing, you're doing a writing job at the moment as well, right, Emma?
A what job?
You have a column.
Writing. Right. Sorry, I
Yes.
thought it was rating. I thought, what am I rating?
Not me, I hope.
Yes, I have. Yeah. So so a few years ago I used to write for Digital Filmmaker magazine. That's no more. I was like the Q&A expert in there. Thankfully I didn't ramble as much as I've done on this interview. But yeah, now I'm actually writing for We Belong Dead magazine. I don't know what's the best way to show this. Hang on. So I've got a couple of covers here. Yeah, and I've got a column. I'll see if I can find in this issue here. One sec.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah.
Was that?
So
yeah.
yeah, Emma Dark's Dark Corner. You can see some dolls in there. You see Otis there.
Yes.
Oreo and things like that. So I mean, this is just so whereas Digital Filmmaker magazine, I was trying to give film advice and stuff like that in there.
Mm-hmm.
This is a little bit different. This is just me talking about what's going on. So what's going on with my projects, things I've got up to, crazy dolls that I've bought, things like that. Obviously, you know, when we're not in the middle of a pandemic, I probably have a bit more of a variety to talk about as well. So yeah. And obviously We Belong Dead, even though I said to you, obviously I don't come from the classic horror camp in terms of, you know, what we're talking about, sort of the 50s and stuff like that. Sci-fi, 50s sci-fi, absolutely.
Okay.
You know, but this is quite sort of aimed at classic horror. So if you do like that, it's definitely a magazine to pick up. But it does cover a whole range of stuff, whole range of horror and sci-fi stuff. So yeah.
Amazing. So I guess this side of the water, we will probably get that at Indigo. So I'll make sure I'm going to do a little bit of research and drop some links in the end of this video. Is there, obviously I know you've kind of given us a bit of a sense of where you're kind of going in your new films as far as you can, and I understand that. Is there anything else you want to kind of let us know before we sort of sign off for the day?
Yeah, I can talk about, so Salient -10
Yep.
is the film I released last year. So that was my last festival film. We talked about that earlier today.
Mm-hmm.
So you can get that on DVD. It's like a dual DVD. There's like different covers you can get if you get the collector's version stuff. So yeah, that's that. And I've got some posters and stuff. And they're all on my Etsy store. But if you go on my website, you've got all the links off of there.
And I'll be dropping that in here.
Yeah, that'd be great. So if anyone's interested in actually getting it on physical media, because all this stuff, you know, I produced all that myself. I designed all that. So yeah, you know, there's a lot of kind of like blood, sweat and passion that's gone into these things. So if someone wants to buy it, they know they're going to get the best quality that I produce. So
perfect. Emma, this has been absolutely wonderful. Please don't let this be the last time we have a conversation.
No, absolutely not. And hopefully I won't ramble so much next time.
Oh my goodness gracious me, don't. It's been fascinating. It's been amazing. Okay. Thank you for your time. Have yourself a wonderful rest of your Sunday, and look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Yeah, you too. Thanks very much.
Take care, Emma.
Thanks. Bye.